While those commodity prices are where things stand right now when it comes to those sector performances, the performances put just 5 minutes into trade, where we've got the JSE still on a halt in terms of trading activity. Well, in the meantime, in the broader economic picture, we've seen Stats SA release second quarter jobless data, those figures having come in about an hour ago and showing that South Africa's jobless rate ticked up to 25.3% in the second quarter compared to 25.2% in the first. Loane Sharp, labour market analyst at Adcorp, joins us now to unpack the detail there, but also to look at some of the forecasts he has in terms of the outlook moving forward. Thanks so much, Loane, for joining us this afternoon. Well, just a couple of weeks ago, we had Adcorp release its employment index results, which reflected a slowing down in the rate at which employment has been falling, in that case between May and June. How is today's data compared with your readings?
It's a very similar picture. Clearly, we're not falling off a cliff as we were 15 months ago, but I think this data and the data of the last 6 months confirms that we're on a very slow recovery path to restoring the employment picture we had in 2008. Bearing in mind that over the last 15 months, we've lost 50% of all the jobs we created in the preceding 10 years. It's going to take a long, slow slog to get us back to those levels.
Long, slow slog to take us there, but let's take a look at some of the factors that are playing a supportive role for now.
Yes, the World Cup was very evident in these figures. There was a fantastic World Cup response from our informal sector, which created 115,000 jobs. Just during this quarter, we will expect to see that again in the third quarter. The World Cup really was a spectacular performance, and our informal sector responded very well to that. There's not much evidence of the formal sector responding. The jobs picture in the formal sector is still relatively weak, but where last quarter, for example, every single sector was weak, we're now pointing out at specific sectors. Trade seems to be turning the corner, finance has turned the corner, and in fact in the financial services sector we have now as much employment as we did a year ago, when most sectors are down. So trade and finance are doing very well, but our manufacturing sector, for example, is very, very weak.
Yep, let's hone in there, because before we move on to that manufacturing space, I want to take a look at the construction sector. It is a sector that has a very cyclical nature, that along with retail trade sectors and the wholesale sector as well. And we're seeing unemployment continuing to fall in those spaces. What's your outlook there, with now the World Cup out of the way and construction contracts having ended?
Well, we have a huge public infrastructure pipeline. Nearly R1 trillion of public investment will be made in roads, transport infrastructure and other things. So for at least the next 5 years, we're going to see buoyancy from government investment, and that should lift the employment picture generally. But I think it means we've got to have a sustained recovery in the economy before the construction and other sectors will really play their role.
Well, having said that, I mean, the gloomy picture having been painted, looking at the broader market news to consider. I mean, we've seen demands being made for above inflation wage increases, and that's getting louder and louder. What do you make of the justification there, where unemployment is still, albeit slight, on the increase?
I think we have two South Africas. We have one South Africa where workers who have jobs are characterized by increasingly luxurious conditions, wage levels, non-wage increases, housing allowances and others are on the rise. And by some accounts they're rising at up to 20% a year. The other South Africa is people who cannot find work, although they're desperately looking for work or have even given up hope of looking for work. And their prospects of finding work at all in their lifetimes is receding all the time.
Yeah, well, prospects looking gloomy specifically, and let's go into the manufacturing space here, the textile industry. Just yesterday we put that industry under the spotlight, and we were looking at how government stimulus or supportive policies for the industry needs to be put in place to ensure no more closures of factories, no more job cuts moving forward. What's your view on this, and government subsidies, the role they have to play in this economy?
Well, I think it's cute that the government wants to, or is considering providing subsidies to especially the clothing and textile industry, because what we've observed in terms of job losses in that industry is largely government's creation. Wage increases in that industry have not been competitive with other clothing and textile manufacturers around the world. As a result, our clothing and textile industry is in systematic decline. We rather import clothing and textiles. So, government subsidies, I think, trying to address what is originally a government-created problem, I don't think that makes sense. I think we have to go back to the root causes of why our manufacturing sector is in systematic decline. And I think a large part of that we're going to find is wage increases, which are just not affordable to keep those sectors competitive.
That one thing to consider. What about our stringent labor laws that are in place? Because it places employers in a very difficult predicament where, there's just so many uncertainties about that they're just too cautious to employ too heftily right now before signs of a full recovery emerge.
Our labour laws make it impossible to hire tentatively. Because as soon as someone is employed in your environment, they have all the benefits of an employee who's been with your organization for 10 or 15 years. As a result, our recovery will have to be well established and long confirmed before employers will expand their employment. That's why we're seeing temporary employment rising so dramatically in South Africa, because it's a different type of employment, less secure. Organizations make a smaller commitment to those employees than they do to permanent workers.
One would assume that this is even more important in a context where we know that Adcorp 2 weeks ago highlighted that there is a growing concern that those historical linkages between economic growth and job creation has weakened significantly since the 2000s.
Yes, well, we've seen a raft of about 18 different labour laws and regulations introduced since 1993. In fact, the labour market, because of historical political issues around the labour market, was the first really to receive government regulatory attention. The effect of those laws is to add about 109 billion rand a year to employers' costs of administering those laws. I mean, that is crazy. We're going to have to, at some point, look, and it may take the unemployment rate being at 30% in the next 5 or 6 years, it may take that for us to revisit those laws.